Mr. Westfall, you want me to turn this lapel mic on now? When Pastor Ruley asked me a few weeks ago now if I wanted to speak tonight, I had been thinking prior to that time about trials, and I'm not sure why my mind was on trials. I have a pretty good idea. At that time, I was about 2 weeks into a new job. The company I was working for 20 years, a combined total of 20 years. I've done 2 stints with that company. The owner wanted to retire, and he closed the business. So in 20 years, you can imagine I was very comfortable there. Okay, I knew what he expected. I knew how to do the things he expected, the way he expected them done. After 20 years, I wasn't very often surprised. He wasn't very often surprised by what I would do. But he turned 60 in August of this year, and he said, you know what, it's not fun anymore, I'm done. So he made arrangements with another electrical contractor in the area to take all of his employees. So I didn't miss a day of work. I finished with him on a Friday and started with this new company Monday. But 2 weeks into it, now being a month into it, this Monday started my 5th week. It's rough. It's tough because 20 years, it can make a person extremely comfortable. And if you're not careful, it can make you lazy. And now I'm the new guy. So when Pastor approached me, I thought, okay, well, I don't want to pass up an opportunity. So yes, I'll do it. And then I just asked the Lord, lay something on my heart that we can all relate to. And he said, trials. So that's my trial right now, being the new guy at work. And the first week I was there, we had a big overtime job to do in Elkhart. And we had started the job with the contractor that closed, and we finished it with this new contractor, which that created some headaches for me. I was lead on the project. And we worked Friday 13 hours, and the next day, Saturday, 12 hours. And it was an exhausting job. And I had good electricians with me. I had a third-year apprentice electrician with me from this new company who I didn't know, never had met the young man prior to this job. And obviously, he was comfortable enough around me to speak things that I would never say. I'm talking the filthiest language you've ever heard. So after a couple of minutes of that, I thought, okay, how can I get this young man, he's 29, his name is Kevin. I thought, how can I get this young man to stop talking this way without coming across as pushy or rude or I want to keep the door open to witness to him. So I wanted to be gentle. I wanted to be careful. So this was after Pastor Ruley had approached me about tonight. So I figured out a way to broach the subject with him that I get to stand up and speak to you guys tonight. And he said, oh, well, what are you speaking on? And I said, I think I'm going to speak about trials. And he says, well, if you haven't hurt badly, you haven't lived. And I thought, wow, that's pretty striking for somebody who doesn't know the Lord to make a statement like that. 29 years old, not married, lives alone. And in his life, at 29, he's already had significant enough pain or trials without the Lord to walk through it with him to make a remark like that. If you would, pray that I will have opportunities to witness to this young man because he needs the Lord. He said to me, I could never be a preacher. And I said, why not? And he said, because I'm not a good enough man for that. And I said, neither am I. But everybody here is familiar with trials. We all have trials. I've heard more than one pastor say that you're either in a trial now, you're going into one, or you're coming out of one. So they're always close. The older I get, the more I see that in my own life. But I want to look at what James said about trials. James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. I'm going to read that. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. So, one result of a trial should be, if we respond properly, patience. We should come out of it more patient than we were when we went in. You would probably all agree with me that one type of trial is temptation. And he says, when ye fall into diverse temptations. If you remember when your kids were really young and they were really testing your patience, you might have said to them, you're trying my patience. Trying sounds a lot like trial. It's not always easy in the midst of a trial to be thankful for that trial, especially if it's a particularly difficult trial. I'm not prone in a trial to say, thank you, Lord, for caring enough about me to invest yourself in me to make me more like your son. That's not my first response, but it should be. It needs to be. If I were radically obedient in my thinking, that's how I would tune my thoughts as quickly as possible. Lord, you're trying to teach me something here. Thank you. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, if you would turn there. Beloved, do not think it strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened to you. Anybody ever been caught completely off guard by a trial? Wow, I didn't see that coming. Or, well, I could tell something was about to happen, but I sure wasn't expecting that. Peter says that's not the right response. Don't be surprised. It's coming. And there's a good chance that the one that's coming is preparing you for the one after it. If we could see and look out there, we would see them lined up, ready. And the challenge for us is to respond properly. According to James and Peter, we should be joyful when a trial comes, and we shouldn't be surprised by it. Most of you know that in August of 14, my family picked up, moved to Florida. My wife had never lived anywhere except South Bend, Mishawaka. I moved here from the South in 1987. I was 16. So I've lived some other places. It wasn't as much of a shock to me as it was to her and my daughters. My daughters had only lived in one house prior to that. And I remember the day that it was our final night in the house. Everything was packed. The house was empty. The Slacks came and helped us. And the girls were walking through the empty house, and they lost it. This is our house. What are we doing? Or can we unload the stuff and bring it back in? No. We're expected in Florida in 2 days. And seeing them lose it, then I lost it, which it's a house. It's okay. But I expected that first year to be difficult. And people told us, this is going to be really hard. And you think that that prepares you. It doesn't. The understatement of the year is that that first year was hard. It was nearly unbearable. Okay, that was one of two extended trials in my life and my wife's life that long term put me on my knees and sometimes on my face. And I didn't understand it because we sold our house and gave a lot of stuff away and picked up and moved 900 miles to serve the Lord. This should be easy, right? And I kept thinking, how can a missionary pick up and move across the world, across oceans, where the language is different, and bring next to nothing with them, and count on the support of other believers? They've got it a lot harder than we have it. But I learned something about the Lord in that move to Florida and during our time in Florida. We didn't know anybody there. We're not related to anybody down there. And I think that part was hardest for my wife, being away from her parents who were getting older and are having some health problems. We both she hadn't worked outside the home for a number of years, and she was working full-time. So that brought many challenges with it. But something I learned about the Lord through that trial is that He doesn't waste anything. And by that I mean God can take one challenge for one person and use it for a lot of people. I'm still not sure why God had us move to Florida and only stay 2 years, but I am sure that He had us move to Florida, and I'm sure He had us move back. I don't doubt either one. One of the reasons that I think we were sent to Florida was I was able, through injuring my shoulder and going to 48 sessions of physical therapy to try to resolve that, I was able to witness to a physical therapist who was pulling on my arm and making me cry. And she said, I was raised Pentecostal, but I've been out of the church for a long time, since I was a teenager. And I just don't know if the Lord will have me back. And her name was Rhonda. I said, well, Rhonda, the Bible doesn't teach that you need to behave a certain way to be accepted by God. It's not what you do, it's what He did. Amen. At Calvary. And that was her response. That was like an epiphany for her. She actually stopped pulling on my arm and said, wow, I've never really heard it explained that way. And it was kind of a long conversation, but she said, things make sense to me now that never did. And I believe that she prayed for salvation that day or very soon thereafter. We didn't pray together, but I had some contact with her by email after that, and she was grateful. So maybe that's why. And if that's the reason, that's fine. I'm good with the trial, with the difficult time we had in Florida. Let's turn to, actually don't turn there, I'm just going to read it to you. It's one verse. Luke 22, verse 31 says, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. So, if we read that, and then we remember Job and how Satan and God had a conversation about Job, the devil had to ask God, can I do this to Job? Can I do this to Job? Can I do this? And God said, you can do anything you want, but take his life. And then he tells Peter here, Jesus tells Peter here, Peter, Satan hath desired you. Well, if he desired Peter, then he desires us. And he wants to come after us, and he knows how to come after us. I wonder if we might someday know what all he wanted to do to us, only to be told, no, not going to do that. But considering the fact that God doesn't waste anything, and he can accomplish many things with one event or one trial for one person or one family, it's easy for him to allow a trial and have the person in the trial grow and those who are witnessing the trial grow. I'm reminded of Jonah. He was on the ship. He had a storm that redirected and corrected him and caused the sailors on the ship to be converted to believers in the one true God, or Old Testament salvation. So God used one event, one trial for Jonah and for them for multiple purposes. Sometimes I think a trial can come to show you something about yourself. Let's look at the account of Gideon in Judges chapter 6. And Gideon learned something about himself. I want to start in verse 12. Judges 6, verse 12. It says, "And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor." And Gideon was called a mighty man of valor. And does anybody remember what he was doing, where he was standing when this angel appeared to him? My understanding is that he was hiding. And a man of valor doesn't hide. Yet he was called a mighty man of valor. And then in verse 13, he responds in a way that reveals his heart about the trial that Israel finds themselves in because of their disobedience. But jumping to verse 14, "And the Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might." So he's called him a mighty man of valor, and now he's saying, "Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent thee?" That's key. Have I not sent thee? So in this trial that Gideon's about to go into, leading a battle and scared to death, he is saying, "I have sent thee. I will be with you." And he said unto him, "O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." Isn't it interesting how God chooses to do the greatest things with the smallest people? Nobody would have called Gideon a mighty man of valor. But God saw something, and he wanted to show Gideon something. Speaking of using the smallest people to do the greatest things, the disciples, most of them were fishermen. They probably didn't smell too good. They were not the upper crust of society. And then I think of when the angels appeared to announce the birth of Christ. Who did they appear to? The only ones lower than the fishermen, the shepherds. Verse 36 in Judges chapter 6 says, "And Gideon said unto God, If thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast said, behold, I will put a fleece of wool in the floor, and if the dew be on the fleece only, and it be dry upon all the earth beside, then shall I know that thou wilt save Israel by mine hand, as thou hast said." Test number 1, checking God to make sure that he said what he thinks he said. And fear can drive us to do that. And it was so, verse 38, "And it was so, for he rose up early on the morrow, and thrust the fleece together, and wringed the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water." And I know you've all heard this. Verse 39, "And Gideon said unto God, Let not thine anger be hot against me, and I will speak but this once. Let me prove, I pray thee, but this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry, only upon the fleece, and upon all the ground let there be dew. And God did so that night, for it was dry upon the fleece only, and there was dew on all the ground." It's easy to question God in the midst of a trial. Easy. But look how patient he was with Gideon. We don't see anything in that passage about God being angry about being tested twice to find out if this is really what you want me to do. The point I want to make about Gideon is that God showed him something about himself. Gideon, you can be a mighty man of valor because I've called you to be a mighty man of valor. Another reason for our trials is God might want to show us something about him. Matthew chapter 8. Matthew 8, verse 23 through 27. And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. And he saith unto them, Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? The way I understand this passage is that the Lord was trying to teach them, put your eyes on me, not on that out there. Where is your faith? I'm still trying to learn that. In a trial, put my eyes on him, lock him there, and keep him there. And I often don't do so well with that. But he's patient. I believe some of my trials have come to cause me to pray more. So 3 reasons in my life that I believe God has revealed to me for trials, and I don't have reasons for all my trials, but 3 reasons I believe I've been taught are, I'm going to show you something about yourself, I'm going to show you something about me, and I'm going to make you pray. 2 Kings chapter 20. And we'll read verses 1 through 6. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death, and the prophet Isaiah the son of Amos came to him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Then he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth, and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. And it came to pass, afore Isaiah was gone out into the middle court, that the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Turn again and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee. On the 3rd day thou shalt go up unto the house of the Lord. And I will add unto thy days 15 years. And I will deliver thee in this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria. And I will defend this city for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. So Hezekiah's life extended by 15 years. And obviously there was a judgment involved there that he would be a part of the release of that. But something I got from that passage was, God said, you're done. I'm going to take your life. Get your house in order. Be ready. He prayed. God changed his mind and extended his life. That being told by the prophet, you're going to die soon, drove him to prayer. And God responded. But before God said, I will extend your life, Hezekiah prayed. If I'm going to be honest, another thing I learned through the trial in Florida was that prayer is more vital. I knew it was vital. Every Christian should know that prayer is vital. But I learned in Florida that it's more vital than I thought it was. If I'm going to be honest, there's still that rare morning when I leave the house to go to work and I haven't prayed. Now, I've spent time in the Word, but I let time get away from me, and off I go. And I don't have the truck in gear before the Spirit says, "What are you doing? You're going to go out into this world without talking to God." It feels like leaving the house without an article of clothing on. And in my conviction, I start to pray, driving and praying. Sometimes out loud, sometimes silently. And I know God hears those prayers, and I know God answers those prayers. But He doesn't do that because of my spirituality. He does that because of His love for me. And I would not leave the house without prayer as a deliberate act of putting distance between me and God. That would be foolish. It's just laziness. It's not good clock management. And I should be better. He has asked me and you to get alone in a secret, private place and spend time with Him. I cannot pray the same way in my car that I can in a prayer closet. I can't do it. Too much going on around me. It's different. We should be humbled that the God of the universe wants that kind of a relationship with us. He wants that one-on-one time with us. Sinful as we are, He says, "Come talk to me." I don't mean to imply that God only has 3 reasons for sending a trial. Sometimes we won't know the reason for the trial. May never know, or you may not know until much, much later. When that happens, I just try to remember Philippians 1:6. You don't need to turn there. It's one verse. "Being confident of this very thing, that He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ." I don't have to know the reason for the trial. If I can remember Philippians 1:6, He's changing me. That's the only reason I need. I asked a couple of the senior saints in this church to share a recent trial with me. Before I get into that, I know at least one person here tonight is in an extended trial as we speak. Probably more than one person. But I want to publicly say how much I admire Mr. Keller being here every service with what he is going through with his wife and how long she's been sick. And it would be easy to pull the plug on church attendance and say, "I got to be here." But he's faithful, and I'm humbled by that. And I really look up to you, Mr. Keller, and I appreciate it. One of the people I asked to share a recent trial with me was Mr. Sheets. And I gave him a paper with a couple questions on it a couple weeks ago. And I said this: "What was your trial? Did your trial cause you to grow spiritually? How so?" What was your trial? Here's his response. June 1, 2017, heart surgery where I should have died, but survived because of the prayer of others. I went from a relatively strong old man to an invalid that could not do anything by myself, from going to the bathroom, showering, or walking. Now, 7 months later, I'm about 50% of the man I was before surgery. That is hard to take for a man that suffered a pride problem to begin with. Maybe that pride problem is why God allowed this to happen. I don't know. I'm still trying to find out. I lost all pride and modesty that first day in recovery, being cared for by all female nurses. Did your trial cause you to grow spiritually? How so? Yes, it forced me to draw closer to God and depend on Him, even to survive. He spared me for a reason, and I'm still trying to find out what that reason is. I'm confident that He will show me the why in due time. Until then, I'm still trying to get my strength back so that when He does show me the why He spared me, I'll be ready. Pray for me. I've had that in my Bible for 2 weeks. And I'm going to keep that for future reference for my next trial. And then the other person got the same questions from me, and it was Sharon Lloyd. And as you know, she had cancer and went through intense treatment for that. Here's what she said. Cancer changed my life in so many ways. When I was diagnosed, I felt panic, but God quickly changed that to peace. So much peace, I was in awe of it. The Bible says He has that peace, but I experienced it for the first time as a complete peace. I wake up every morning thankful for another day, no matter how that day turns out. I do not want to live my life unconsciously. I want to be aware of God's plan for my life. I want to have active compassion on the people around me. I want to love my family more. I allowed my family to show their love for me, which I didn't know how to do before cancer. It opens up a new awareness for which I'm thankful. Now I pray for the strength to do the things necessary. Again, I'll be keeping that. When I look at the older people in this church, the faithful, who are here tonight, you're here every Sunday, both services, you're here for Sunday school, I see wisdom. I see experience. I know you've been through things. You might be in some things now. In spite of those trials, I see joy. And most of all, I see Christ. I counted 14 names recently of people on our prayer list who have cancer. 14 names just with cancer. Some of those people are saved, some of them are not. I know one for sure who I had put on there who's not saved, and she has cancer. And so I think, okay, well, should I even be trying to figure out why they have cancer? Probably not. But if they're saved and they have cancer, then God is most likely trying to grow them. If they're not saved and they have cancer, God may be trying to get to know them. I believe that's what He wants for all people, to know us and to grow us. We can waste our trials. They come to us for a purpose, but we can waste them. Some of you may be familiar with John Piper. He's a pastor in Minnesota who survived prostate cancer. And he wrote a book about the experience called Don't Waste Your Cancer. And the book's been out 10 years or more now. And when I heard that title for the first time, I was pretty struck by that. I thought, wow, what an odd thing to say about cancer. How do you waste your... Nobody wants cancer. How do you waste it? But after a couple of trials of my own, I saw how you can waste a trial and you can fail to grow. And that's a shame. He has a list in his book of ways you can waste your cancer. And I read the list, got online, found it, read it. And there were 10 things. 7 of them are applicable if I take out the word cancer and insert the word trial. So here's that list of 7 ways we can waste a trial. You will waste your trial if you do not believe God designed it for you. You will waste your trial if you believe it is a curse and not a gift. You will waste your trial if you seek comfort from any source other than God. You will waste your trial if you let it drive you into solitude rather than deepen your relationships with manifest affection. You will waste your trial if you grieve as those who have no hope. You will waste your trial if you treat sin as casually as you did before. And number 7, you will waste your trial if you fail to use it as a means of witness to the truth and glory of Christ. Trials, we can all relate. We have to go through them, but we need to grow through them. Let's not waste our trials. Let's use them to grow more like Christ. Let's pray. Father, we are thankful for trials. Grateful and humbled that you would invest yourself in us. That you are faithful to finish the work which you've started. Help us to respond properly, not to question, to keep our eyes on you, and to grow. Be with Pastor and Amy as they're away. Give them a refreshing time. Help them to come back ready to serve. We know they are. We ask for travel mercy as we all head home tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to be here in your name.